I think that'll do. I work with the US military HIV research program. So I'm going to present to you, I have no conflicts of interest to declare. I'm going to present to you a little bit about the AFRICOS cohort. I'm just going to very briefly describe it and then talk a little bit about our viral load data and look at it in the context of 1990, and then talk very briefly about resistance data, which luckily for you, we don't have much to show you. So AFRICOS is a prospective observational HIV-focused cohort. It's both a research cohort that can provide detailed information on HIV pathogenesis, impact of comorbidities, but also an important evaluation tool for the MHRP PEPFAR programs. It enrolls adult volunteers from routine care and treatment settings within these programs. The target for HIV infected is 3,600 HIV uninfected as a sort of a comparison group. The cohort enrolls in 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, so Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. These are 5 of the MHRP programs, and it's 11 sites. So these are largely, on the most part, somewhat rural sites in Nigeria. Abuja and Lagos obviously are the exception. They're all civilian sites with the exception of the Nigerian cohort, which, although it's a Nigerian military program, 90% of the clients are actually civilians from the surrounding areas. So, it's actually it's a kind of more representative of the general population. So volunteers are randomly recruited from the HIV clinic lists, and they do include existing clients and new referrals. There isn't a distinction made at recruitment. They undergo 6 monthly follow-up with unscheduled visits for acute illness. They have quite detailed CRFs for physical examination, demographics, social medical history, behavioral CRFs, HIV parameters, including clinical staging, CD4, viral load, genotypic resistance testing is included. There's very comprehensive comorbidity assessment for both infectious and non-infectious comorbidities. Samples are reposed for future research. Just looking at some very basic enrollment demographics, as of March, there were 2,124 HIV positive participants recruited and 436 HIV negative. The mean age of the cohort is 39.3 with 58.2% female. So moving on to the 1990 part of the talk. So this is the continuum of care cascade at the enrollment visit. So the enrollment visit is probably the most representative of what is generally happening around the study sites. As a caveat, when we look at the percentage on ART, this does include, because we're recruiting new and currently on ART, this is a slightly mixed, gives a slightly mixed picture. But of 1,953 recruits at all sites, these are HIV positive only, 66.4% were on ART at enrollment. Looking at viral suppression, we see that it's actually fairly, I think it's reasonably good. It's 85.5%, are below the target of 1,000 copies per mil. 71.6% below the target of the viral load undetectable, which in this study is less than 50. So most recent visit, this is excluding the enrollment visits. Here we see that once they've engaged in care, 85% or 84.1% are now on ART. That's an increase of about 18%. And viral suppression has increased somewhat to 88.4%, with a slightly higher increase in the virally suppressed rate to 76.7%. That's a 5% increase. Looking at what ART our participants are on at enrollment, the vast majority, as would be expected, are on first-line therapy. That's 93%. 7% are on second-line therapy when they enroll. And this, of course, is 7% of those on ART when they enroll. I think of interest is following enrollment in the cohort, 11% switched from first-line to second-line therapy. And just, maybe I'll go back, that is probably reflective of that one of the advantages of being involved in this cohort is that the clinicians do get the results from the cohort study. So although that the care is delivered at the actual, the regular HIV care and treatment setting, it's not provided, the routine care is not provided by this study, but the laboratory results are made available to the clinicians. So resistance testing is done quite comprehensively in this cohort, and resistance is going to be obviously one of the greater challenges as we move ahead with this rollout to achieving the final 90. So we have at the moment 830 resistance samples that have been obtained to date. That includes both those at enrollment and also anyone failing therapy every 6 months. So this is only a very small, this data is just being analyzed at the moment. The very first data that I have is a very tiny number, but it's 27 samples from one of the Nigerian sites. You can see that the HIV subtypes for these sites are fairly much what we would expect in sub-Saharan Africa. 17 of these were actually on ART, and 14 of them had drug resistance mutations. For those that were not on ART, 10 of the zero had drug resistance mutations. The resistance mutations were fairly, I suppose, what one might expect, but there's obviously quite a dramatic number have NNRTI mutations, which confer resistance to efavirenz and nevirapine. So that's 93%, and 71% had resistance to the NRTIs. Of all those with NRTI resistance, they also had an NRTI resistance, and K103N, M184V, and K65R. They are respectively the mutations that confer resistance to nevirapine and efavirenz, lamivudine, and tenofovir were all represented quite commonly. So to conclude, I think that our data shows that it is quite possible, and I think it's consistent with the data that we've been seeing today to approach the second and third 90/90 targets in sub-Saharan Africa. We have comprehensive resistance data pending. There are limitations to generalizability of our cohort data. These participants obviously get more intensive laboratory monitoring than they would otherwise. There's a focus on higher volume facilities that have the capacity to implement this kind of study. The cohort does bring for us it can act as a sort of a benchmark to compare our routine program data against, and does give very granular data on comorbidities, toxicities, and behaviors which will have an impact on program and potentially policy. So with that, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to present here today. I'd like to acknowledge the entire AFRICOS study team and our collaborators, and of course our people living with HIV, volunteers who so generously contribute their time to participate in this study so that we can gather this information. Thank you.